The scorching Arizona sun beat down on Madeline Montgomery's back as she crested the hill, her horse snorting with fatigue after the long journey. What she saw below stopped her in her tracks: a broken wooden fence, a man on his knees desperately trying to repair it, and two small boys, no more than 5 and 7, sleeping in the hard-packed dirt nearby. The sight tugged at something deep within her, something she'd thought she'd buried alongside her husband 2 years ago. The year was 1878, and the West was still wild and unforgiving, especially for a woman traveling alone. But Madeline had left behind her comfortable life in Boston 6 months ago, answering the call of adventure and necessity in equal measure. Her late husband's debts had forced her to seek opportunity elsewhere, and her teaching credentials had secured her a position at the newly established school in Copper Creek, Arizona Territory. She hadn't expected to encounter anyone on this lonely stretch of trail, still half a day's ride from town according to her map. Madeline tugged gently on the reins, bringing her mare to a halt. The man below hadn't noticed her yet, too absorbed in his work, his broad shoulders hunched with exhaustion as he hammered a post into the unyielding ground. "Hello there," Madeline called out, immediately regretting breaking the silence when the man startled and spun around, hand flying to his hip where a pistol was holstered. His eyes, a striking blue even visible from this distance, narrowed as he assessed her. "Madam," he acknowledged with a tip of his worn Stetson, though his hand remained near his weapon. "I apologize for startling you," Madeline said, guiding her horse down the gentle slope. As she drew closer, she could see the exhaustion etched into the man's sun-weathered face. He couldn't have been more than 30, but the lines around his eyes suggested he'd lived through more than his fair share of hardship. "I'm Madeline Montgomery, on my way to Copper Creek." The man relaxed slightly, though wariness still radiated from him. "Samuel Thornton," he replied, his voice rough from disuse. "Most folks call me Sam." As Madeline approached, one of the boys stirred, rubbing his eyes with tiny fists. He couldn't have been more than 5 years old, with the same striking blue eyes as his father. The older boy remained asleep, his arm thrown protectively over his face to shield it from the sun. "Your boys look exhausted," Madeline observed gently. Sam's jaw tightened. "Been a long couple of days," he said simply, turning back to the fence post. "Storm took out half my boundary line 2 nights back. Cattle won't stay put without it." Madeline dismounted, her legs stiff from the hours in the saddle. "I don't mean to intrude, Mr. Thornton, but might I offer some assistance? I have provisions, and it looks like you and your boys could use some refreshment." Sam looked like he wanted to refuse, pride evident in the set of his shoulders, but after a glance at his sleeping sons, he gave a curt nod. "Much obliged, madam." Madeline retrieved her canteen and a bundle of cornbread wrapped in cloth from her saddlebag. She approached the younger boy first, who was now fully awake and watching her with wide, curious eyes. "Hello there," she said softly, kneeling down in the dirt beside him. "I'm Miss Montgomery." "What's your name?" "I'm Jacob," the boy replied, his voice small but clear. "That's my brother Ethan." He pointed to the still sleeping older child. "Well, Jacob, would you like some water and cornbread? I made it myself just yesterday." Jacob nodded eagerly, accepting the canteen with both hands. Madeline helped him take a small sip before breaking off a piece of cornbread for him. "Thank you, miss," he said politely, hunger evident as he devoured the modest offering. The commotion finally roused Ethan, who sat up abruptly, immediately on guard. His eyes, the same blue as his father's and brother's, darted between Madeline and Sam. "It's all right, Ethan," Sam called over. "Miss Montgomery is passing through to Copper Creek. She's kindly sharing her provisions." Ethan relaxed marginally, accepting the water and food with a mumbled thanks, though his eyes remained watchful. Madeline approached Sam, offering him the canteen. "You must be thirsty as well, Mr. Thornton." He hesitated only briefly before taking a long drink. "Thank you," he said, more sincerely this time. "Been out here since dawn trying to get this fence fixed before any more of my cattle stray. Boys needed rest, so." He gestured to where they had been sleeping in the dirt. "You've been working alone, no ranch hands to help." Madeline asked, surveying the extensive damage to the fence line that stretched into the distance. A shadow crossed Sam's face. Had to let them go last month. Droughts hit everyone hard this year. He picked up his hammer again, determination in every line of his body. We'll manage, always have. Madeline looked at the two young boys, then at the impossible amount of work facing their father. Without overthinking her decision, she set down her canteen and rolled up her sleeves. I may not look it, Mr. Thornton, but I'm stronger than I appear. My father believed in raising his daughter to be useful. Show me what needs doing. Sam stared at her in disbelief. Miss Montgomery, I couldn't possibly, I insist, Madeline interrupted. I'm already behind schedule for reaching Copper Creek today. Another few hours won't make a difference. And I'd rest easier knowing these young gentlemen had their fence repaired and could get home for a proper meal and rest. For the first time, the ghost of a smile touched Sam's lips. You're not like any Eastern lady I've ever met, Miss Montgomery. I'll take that as a compliment, Mr. Thornton, she replied, picking up a spare pair of work gloves that lay nearby. Now, shall we begin? Under the relentless Arizona sun, Madeline worked alongside Sam, holding fence posts steady while he drove them into the ground, passing tools when needed, and even hammering in a few nails herself. The boys, rejuvenated by food and rest, helped gather smaller pieces of wood and bring water from a nearby stream. As they worked, Madeline learned that Sam's wife had died 3 years ago from influenza, leaving him to raise their sons alone on the struggling ranch he'd inherited from his father. The past year had been particularly difficult, with drought threatening their livelihood and no money to hire help after the last of the ranch hands had moved on. The boys are all I have, Sam admitted quietly as they took a brief rest. Everything I do is for them. They're fortunate to have such a dedicated father, Madeline replied, wiping sweat from her brow. Many children have far less. By mid-afternoon, they had repaired nearly half of the damaged fence. Madeline's hands were blistered despite the gloves, her back ached, and her fine traveling dress was likely ruined, but she felt a sense of accomplishment that surprised her. We should stop here, Sam said, noticing her discomfort despite her attempts to hide it. You've done more than enough, Miss Montgomery, and you still have a long ride ahead. Madeline knew he was right. The sun was already beginning its descent, and she'd need to make camp soon if she hoped to reach Copper Creek by the following afternoon. Still, she was reluctant to leave the job unfinished. Are you certain you can manage the rest on your own? She asked, looking at the remaining broken sections. Sam nodded. What we've done today has secured the most critical part. The rest can wait until tomorrow. He hesitated, then added, Our ranch house isn't far, just over that rise about 2 miles. You're welcome to stay the night instead of camping alone. It's not much, but it's shelter. The offer surprised her. I wouldn't want to impose. It's the least I can offer after your help today, Sam insisted. And I know the boys would feel better knowing you're safe. These parts can be dangerous for a woman alone, even one as capable as yourself. Madeline considered her options. The sensible course would be to politely decline and continue on her journey. She barely knew this man and his children. Yet something about Samuel Thornton's steady gaze and his son's hopeful expressions made her reconsider. That's very kind of you, Mr. Thornton. I accept your hospitality for the night. Relief visibly washed over Sam's features. Good, that's good. He turned to his sons, who had been listening intently. Boys, gather your things. We're heading home, and Miss Montgomery is coming with us. Jacob let out a small cheer, while Ethan managed a genuine smile for the first time since Madeline had met him. She couldn't help but wonder how long it had been since they'd had a visitor at their ranch, or any female company at all. As they packed up the tools, Madeline noticed Sam wincing slightly as he lifted the heavy toolbox. Are you injured, Mr. Thornton? She asked with concern. He straightened immediately as if caught in a moment of weakness. Old injury. Acts up sometimes, nothing to worry about. Madeline didn't press, but she noticed how he favored his left side as they made their way back to where his horse was tethered alongside a small wagon the boys must have been riding in earlier. The journey to the Thornton ranch was quiet, but not uncomfortable. Madeline rode her mare alongside the wagon where Sam drove with his sons beside him. The landscape was beautiful in its harsh way, all rugged mountains in the distance and expanses of scrubland dotted with cacti and the occasional stunted tree. As they crested the hill Sam had indicated earlier, the Thornton ranch came into view. It was modest but well built, with a main house constructed of sturdy logs and stone, a large barn, and several smaller outbuildings. A corral held a few horses, and in the distance, Madeline could see a small herd of cattle grazing in a fenced pasture. "It's lovely," she said sincerely, and was rewarded with a look of pride from Sam, been in the family for 2 generations. "My father built it, and I hope to pass it on to my boys one day." As they approached the house, Madeline noticed that while the structures were sound, there were signs of a property being maintained by a single, overworked man. The porch steps needed repair, paint was peeling from the shutters, and the garden that must have once been tended with care was now mostly weeds with a few stubborn vegetables fighting for survival. They pulled up to the house just as the sun was setting, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink. Sam helped Madeline down from her horse with strong, gentle hands, and for a brief moment, she was acutely aware of how long it had been since she'd felt a man's touch. She pushed the thought aside as inappropriate. "Ethan, show Miss Montgomery to the spare room while Jacob and I see to the horses," Sam instructed, his voice gentle but leaving no room for argument. Ethan nodded solemnly, standing straighter as he accepted the responsibility. "Yes, sir." "This way, Miss Montgomery." The interior of the house was simple but clean, with functional furniture and a few touches that spoke of a woman's hand in the past curtains that were beginning to fray at the edges, a faded quilt draped over a rocking chair, a bookshelf filled with a surprising variety of volumes. The spare room Ethan led her to was small but tidy, with a narrow bed, a washstand with a pitcher and bowl, and a chest of drawers. "This was my mama's sewing room," Ethan explained quietly. "Pa put a bed in here after she died, said we might have guests someday." The way he said it made Madeline suspect there hadn't been any guests in a very long time. "It's perfect, thank you, Ethan," she replied warmly. "Your mother had lovely taste." She gestured to the curtains, which were a faded floral pattern but still pretty. Something in the boy's expression softened. "She made those herself. She was real good at sewing and stuff." "I'm sure she was wonderful," Madeline said gently. "Would you tell me more about her while I freshen up?" And so, as Madeline washed the dust from her face and hands, Ethan perched on the edge of the bed and hesitantly began to share memories of his mother. He spoke of her cooking, how she would sing while she worked, and how she taught him his letters before she got sick. By the time Sam and Jacob returned from the barn, Ethan was animatedly describing how his mother had once stood up to a traveling peddler who tried to cheat her. Sam paused in the doorway, surprise and something like gratitude in his eyes as he watched his normally reserved older son chatting comfortably with Madeline. "Dinner's ready," he announced softly, almost reluctant to interrupt. Dinner was a simple affair of beans, cornbread, and some dried venison reconstituted in a stew, but it was hot and filling. Madeline contributed the last of her provisions, some dried apples, and a small jar of honey which the boys regarded as a special treat. After they'd eaten, Sam insisted that Madeline rest while he and the boys cleaned up. She offered to help, but one look at her blistered hands had Sam shaking his head firmly. "You've done enough today, Miss Montgomery. Rest. Doctor and me says those hands need a break." "Doctor?" Madeline inquired, surprised. Sam looked slightly embarrassed. "Not officially. Was studying medicine back east before my father died and I had to come home to take over the ranch. Picked up enough to patch up my boys and the occasional cowhand." This new piece of information intrigued Madeline. "That explains the books on anatomy and medicine I noticed on your shelf." "Just because I couldn't finish my education doesn't mean I stopped learning," Sam replied with a hint of defensiveness. "I think it's admirable," Madeline assured him. "Knowledge is valuable wherever we find ourselves." The tension in Sam's shoulders eased, and he nodded before turning back to the dishes. Madeline made her way to the small sitting area where a few comfortable chairs surrounded a stone fireplace. Despite the heat of the day, evenings in the high desert could be cool. and someone likely Jacob, given his eagerness to help, had laid a small fire that cast a warm glow around the room. She selected a book from the shelf, a volume of poetry by Wordsworth, that showed signs of frequent reading, and settled into a chair. The simple domesticity of the scene, with Sam and his sons working together in the kitchen, their voices a gentle murmur, stirred something in Madeline she'd thought long dormant. After the boys were put to bed, with Jacob insisting on a story that Sam patiently provided, he joined Madeline by the fire with 2 cups of coffee. "Hope I'm not disturbing your reading," he said, offering her one of the cups. "Not at all, thank you." She accepted the coffee gratefully. "Your home is lovely, Mr. Thornton. You've created a warm environment for your sons." Sam's gaze drifted to the fire. "Try my best. It was easier when Catherine was alive. She knew how to make a house a home." He took a sip of his coffee, his expression distant. "Boys deserve more than what I can give them." "I think you underestimate yourself," Madeline said gently. "They're polite, helpful, and clearly adore you. That speaks volumes about your parenting." A ghost of a smile touched Sam's lips. "Kind of you to say." He hesitated, then asked, "What brings you to Copper Creek, if you don't mind my asking? Not many Eastern ladies venture out this way alone." Madeline explained about her husband's death, the debts he'd left behind, and her decision to accept the teaching position in Copper Creek. "The advertisement said they were desperate for a qualified teacher. The pay isn't much, but it's a fresh start." "Teaching's important work," Sam said with genuine respect. "Our local school closed down last year when the teacher moved on. Been teaching the boys myself, but..." He shrugged. "Some subjects I'm better at than others." "Perhaps they could attend school in Copper Creek," Madeline suggested. "How far is your ranch from town?" "About 4 hours' ride," Sam replied. "Too far for daily travel, especially for young ones." He stared into his coffee. "Been considering moving closer to town, maybe finding work there. Ranch is struggling, has been for years. Droughts just made it worse." "But this is your family home," Madeline said, hearing the reluctance in his voice. "Home is where my boys are," Sam replied simply. "Rest is just land and timber." They talked late into the night, the conversation flowing easily between them. Sam spoke of his dreams of becoming a doctor and how he still helped neighbors with medical issues when needed. Madeline shared stories of her teaching experiences in Boston and her hopes for her new position. Neither of them mentioned how comfortable it felt, this exchange between virtual strangers who somehow seemed to understand each other. When Madeline finally retired to the small spare room, she found herself unable to sleep immediately, her mind too full of the day's unexpected events. She'd set out that morning as a solitary traveler and would end the day under the roof of a widowed rancher and his 2 young sons. Life in the West was certainly unpredictable. The next morning dawned bright and clear. Madeline woke to the sound of activity in the kitchen and the smell of coffee brewing. She dressed quickly in her spare traveling outfit and made her way to the main room, where she found Jacob attempting to set the table while Ethan stirred something in a pot on the stove. "Good morning, boys," she greeted them. "May I help?" "Pa says you're our guest," Ethan replied seriously, "but you can help me watch this oatmeal if you want. It keeps trying to stick." Madeline took the spoon from him with a smile. "Where is your father this morning?" "Checking on the cattle," Jacob supplied, carefully placing forks beside each plate. "He always does that first thing, says it's important to make sure they're all where they should be." Madeline helped the boys finish preparing breakfast, impressed by how capable they were for their ages. By the time Sam returned, they had oatmeal, coffee, and some dried fruit set out on the table. "You didn't have to do this," Sam said when he entered, though his appreciation was evident in his expression. "Your sons did most of the work," Madeline replied. "I merely assisted." After breakfast, Madeline knew she needed to resume her journey to Copper Creek. She had already delayed a day, and the school board would be expecting her soon. "I can't thank you enough for your hospitality, Mr. Thornton," she said as she prepared to leave. "And you as well, Ethan and Jacob. You've been wonderful hosts." Jacob looked crestfallen. "Do you have to go, Miss Montgomery? You could stay here and be our teacher." The innocent suggestion brought a flush to Sam's cheeks. Jacob, Miss Montgomery has a position waiting in Copper Creek. She can't just abandon her commitment. Of course, Madeline agreed quickly, though she was touched by the boy's request. But perhaps I'll visit sometime if your father doesn't mind. We'd like that, Sam said, the sincerity in his voice unmistakable. The door's always open to you, Miss Montgomery. As Sam helped her saddle her horse, he seemed to be wrestling with something. Finally, as she prepared to mount, he spoke. Copper Creek's growing, but it can be a rough place for a woman alone. If you need anything at all, send word. I'm in town at least once a month for supplies. Thank you, Mr. Thornton. I appreciate that more than I can say. On impulse, Madeline extended her hand. I hope we'll meet again soon. Sam took her hand in his touch gentle despite his calloused fingers. I hope so too, Miss Montgomery. With final goodbyes to the boys, who made her promise to visit, Madeline set off for Copper Creek, her thoughts filled with the unexpected encounter that had delayed her journey but somehow enriched it beyond measure. The town of Copper Creek appeared on the horizon late that afternoon, a collection of buildings nestled in a valley with mountains rising beyond. As Madeline approached, she could see that it was larger than she had expected, with a main street featuring a variety of businesses, a church steeple rising above the other structures, and houses spreading outward from the center. She was greeted at the edge of town by the mayor, Harold Perkins, a portly man with an impressive mustache who had been watching for her arrival. Miss Montgomery, we were beginning to worry when you didn't arrive yesterday, he exclaimed, hurrying to help her dismount. I apologize for the delay, Mr. Perkins. I encountered a situation that required my assistance, Madeline explained, deciding that the details of her stay with the Thorntons were not necessary to share immediately. No matter. You're here now, and the children are eager to meet their new teacher. School begins next Monday, which gives you a few days to settle in. Mr. Perkins led her to a small but neat cabin at the edge of town, explaining that it had been built specifically for the teacher's use. It was simply furnished but comfortable, with a bedroom, a small sitting area with a desk, and a basic kitchen. Mrs. Perkins has stocked the pantry with essentials to get you started, the mayor explained, and your salary for the first month has been left on the desk. The school is just 2 blocks from here, next to the church. After ensuring she had everything she needed and promising to introduce her around town the next day, Mr. Perkins left Madeline to settle in. Alone in her new home, she found herself comparing it to the warm, lived-in feeling of the Thornton Ranch. This place was clean and functional, but it lacked the sense of family and history that had made the ranch so immediately appealing. The next few days passed in a flurry of activity as Madeline prepared for the start of school. She met many of the townsfolk, who welcomed her warmly and familiarized herself with the schoolhouse, a single room with rows of benches and a small blackboard. She would be teaching children from ages 6 to 14, approximately 25 students in total. On Sunday, Madeline attended service at the local church, where she was formally introduced to the congregation. As she stood to acknowledge the welcome, her gaze swept across the assembled faces and landed on Samuel Thornton and his sons sitting in the back row. Her heart gave an unexpected leap at the sight of them. Sam was dressed in his Sunday best, his normally unruly hair neatly combed, his sons equally presentable beside him. He caught her eye and offered a small nod of recognition. After the service, as people milled about outside the church, Madeline made her way toward the Thorntons. Mr. Thornton, what a pleasant surprise, she greeted him. I didn't expect to see you in town so soon. Sam removed his hat, holding it respectfully. Miss Montgomery, we don't make it to church every Sunday, but I thought it important today with school starting tomorrow. He glanced down at his sons, wanted to make sure the boys met their new teacher properly. Jacob beamed up at her. Are you really going to be our teacher, Miss Montgomery? Madeline looked at Sam in confusion. I thought you said the ranch was too far for daily travel to school. It is, Sam agreed, a hint of nervousness in his demeanor. We've taken a room at the boarding house. Boys will stay in town during the school week, and I'll come fetch them for weekends at the ranch. You're staying in town, Madeline couldn't hide her surprise. Just the boys and me on weekdays, Sam clarified. Got some work at the livery stable, not doctoring but decent pay. Ranch will keep for weekends until I figure out a more permanent solution. The news filled Madeline with an unexpected joy that she tried to temper. That's wonderful. I'm sure the boys will benefit greatly from regular schooling. Miss Montgomery, Ethan spoke up, his young face serious. Pa says you're the smartest lady he's ever met, and we're lucky to have you for a teacher. Sam's cheeks reddened. Ethan, I'm not sure that's exactly what I said. Yes, it is, Jacob insisted. You said Miss Montgomery was beautiful and smart and kind, and we should mind our manners extra good in her class. The embarrassment on Sam's face was endearing, and Madeline couldn't help but smile. Well, I'm flattered, Mr. Thornton. And I assure you, these young gentlemen always displayed excellent manners during my brief stay with you. Mayor Perkins, who had been circulating among the congregation, approached their small group. Ah, Miss Montgomery, I see you've met Samuel Thornton and his boys. Sam's been a pillar of our community for years, despite living so far out. Did he mention he helps Dr. Miller when medical emergencies arise? Has quite the knack for it. We've actually met before, Madeline explained. Mr. Thornton and his sons kindly offered me shelter during my journey here. The mayor's eyebrows rose with interest. Is that so? Well, how fortuitous. And now the boys will be attending your school. Quite the coincidence. Something in the mayor's tone suggested he found this development more than merely coincidental, and Madeline felt her cheeks warm slightly. If you'll excuse us, Mayor, Sam said, clearly recognizing the same implication, we should be getting back to the boarding house. Boys need their rest before school tomorrow. With polite goodbyes, the Thorntons departed, though not before Sam quietly added, Perhaps you might join us for dinner one evening this week, Miss Montgomery. The boys would enjoy it. I'd like that very much, Madeline replied, aware of the mayor's interested gaze still upon them. The next morning, Madeline stood nervously before her first class. 23 children of varying ages looking back at her with expressions ranging from curiosity to boredom to outright suspicion. Ethan and Jacob sat in the middle rows, Jacob practically bouncing with excitement while Ethan maintained his more reserved demeanor. Good morning, children. I'm Miss Montgomery, your new teacher. I've come all the way from Boston to help you learn and grow, and I'm very excited to begin our journey together. The first day was challenging but rewarding. Madeline quickly assessed the varying levels of education among her students and began organizing them into appropriate groups for different subjects. By lunchtime, she had already identified those who would need extra attention and those who could be pushed further in their studies. When school dismissed for the day, Jacob lingered behind while Ethan waited patiently by the door. Miss Montgomery, Jacob said earnestly, you're the best teacher ever, even better than Pa, and he's real smart. Madeline smiled, touched by the boy's enthusiasm. That's very kind of you to say, Jacob, but it's only our first day, and I'm sure your father is an excellent teacher. He is, Ethan confirmed from the doorway, but he says some things are better taught by someone with proper training. He hesitated, then added, Pa's waiting for us at the livery. He wanted to know if you'd join us for dinner at the boarding house tonight. I'd be delighted, Madeline replied, her heart warming at the invitation. What time should I arrive? 6 o'clock, Ethan said. Mrs. Winters, she runs the boarding house, says dinner's at 6:30, but Pa wanted time to talk to you first. That evening, Madeline changed from her teaching clothes into a simple blue dress that brought out the color of her eyes. She pinned her hair up neatly, allowing a few curls to frame her face, and dabbed a tiny bit of rose water behind her ears, a luxury she rarely indulged in. The boarding house was a large, two-story building on the edge of town, well-maintained with a wide porch wrapped around the front. Sam was waiting for her there, rising from a rocking chair as she approached. He'd clearly made an effort with his appearance as well, wearing a clean shirt with his usual work pants and boots, his hair still damp from a recent washing. Miss Montgomery, he greeted her, his voice warm. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for inviting me, Mr. Thornton. How was your first day at the livery? Sam offered her a seat on the porch swing beside him. Honest work, if not what I'd prefer. Mr. Johnson's fair, though, and the hours allow me to be available for the boys before and after school." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, the swing moving gently beneath them. Finally, Sam spoke again, his voice more hesitant. "I want you to know I didn't move to town just because of you, Miss Montgomery. Been considering it for a while for the boys' education. Your arrival just hastened the decision." Madeline appreciated his honesty. "I understand, Mr. Thornton, and I think it's a wise decision for your sons. They're bright boys who will benefit from formal schooling. Still," Sam continued, "I'd be lying if I said meeting you didn't factor into my thinking." He looked directly at her, his blue eyes intense. "There's something about you, Miss Montgomery. The way you jumped in to help with the fence without a second thought, the way you spoke to my boys like they mattered, the way you fitted our table like you belonged there." Madeline's heart quickened at his words. "Mr. Thornton, Sam," he interrupted gently. "Please call me Sam." "Sam," she amended, liking the way his name felt on her lips. "You should know that I came west to make a fresh start, to establish myself as a teacher. I'm not looking for—" She trailed off, uncertain how to finish that sentence when she wasn't entirely sure what he was offering. "I'm not asking for anything, Madeline," Sam said, using her first name with careful deliberation. "Just the chance to know you better, for my boys to know you better, the rest." He shrugged. "The rest will be whatever it's meant to be." Before Madeline could respond, the front door opened and Jacob burst onto the porch. "Pa, Miss Montgomery, Mrs. Winters says dinner's ready, and she made apple pie because it's a special occasion." Sam stood, offering Madeline his hand. "Shall we?" Dinner at the boarding house was a lively affair, with 6 other boarders joining them at the long table. Mrs. Winters, a widow in her 50s who ran the establishment with military precision, had indeed prepared a special meal in honor of the new teacher. Throughout the meal, Madeline observed Sam with his sons, noting the easy affection between them, the way he listened attentively to their stories from school, and his gentle corrections when their excitement led to interrupting others. He was a good father, patient and kind but firm when needed. After dinner, as the other boarders retired to the sitting room, Sam suggested a short walk before Madeline headed home. With Jacob and Ethan occupied by a game of checkers with Mrs. Winters, they strolled along the quiet streets of Copper Creek in the gathering dusk. "The boys seem to be adjusting well to town life," Madeline observed. Sam nodded. "They're resilient and excited about school, especially with you as their teacher." He glanced at her. "They've talked of little else since we met you." "They made quite an impression on me as well," Madeline admitted. "You've raised them beautifully, Sam." "Done my best," he replied modestly. "Catherine would be proud of them." A shadow crossed his face at the mention of his late wife. She was a wonderful mother. "They remember less of her each year, and that pains me. Especially for Jacob, he was just 2 when she passed." "Tell me about her," Madeline encouraged gently. As they walked, Sam spoke of Catherine, how they'd met when he was in medical school, and she was a nurse. Their shared dream of returning to his family ranch and establishing a small medical practice, and the illness that had claimed her life too soon. "She'd like you," he said finally, as they turned back toward the boarding house. "Strong, independent kind, she valued those qualities." The comparison to his wife was both touching and slightly intimidating. "She sounds like a remarkable woman." "She was," Sam agreed. "And it took me a long time to imagine there could be room in our lives for anyone else." He stopped walking, turning to face Madeline directly. "But meeting you, it's like a door opened that I thought was permanently closed." The honesty of his statement took Madeline's breath away. "Sam, we've known each other such a short time." "I know," he acknowledged. "And I'm not rushing into anything for my sake or the boys, but I wanted you to understand where I stand. The rest is up to you." They had reached the boarding house. On the porch, Sam took her hand gently. "Thank you for joining us tonight." "Thank you for inviting me," Madeline replied, acutely aware of the warmth of his hand around hers. "Perhaps we could make it a regular occurrence. Friday evenings, maybe. The boys would love it. Just the boys." Madeline asked, surprising herself with the boldness of the question. Sam's smile reached his eyes, crinkling the corners. "No, not just the boys." With that simple acknowledgement hanging between them, Madeline took her leave, her mind whirling with possibilities she hadn't considered, when she'd set out for the Arizona Territory. The weeks that followed fell into a pleasant rhythm. Madeline's days were filled with teaching, while her evenings were often spent grading papers and preparing lessons. But every Friday without fail, she joined the Thorntons for dinner, either at the boarding house or occasionally at the small cafe in town for a special treat. On weekends, Sam and the boys would return to the ranch, and Madeline was surprised by how empty the town seemed in their absence. She filled her time by getting to know the other residents of Copper Creek, accepting dinner invitations and attending community events. She quickly became a valued member of the town, her Eastern education and gentle manner earning her respect beyond the schoolroom. One Friday evening in early November, nearly 2 months after Madeline's arrival in Copper Creek, Sam met her outside the schoolhouse after classes had ended. "Thought I might walk you home," he offered, his hat in his hands. "Boys are helping Mrs. Winters with some chores before dinner." They walked in comfortable silence for a few moments before Sam spoke again. "Got a letter from a neighbor near the ranch. Says a mountain lion's been spotted near my cattle. Need to head out there tonight instead of waiting until tomorrow." "Of course," Madeline replied, trying to hide her disappointment at the disruption of their weekly dinner. "The boys must be protected." "That's the thing," Sam said, hesitation in his voice. "Johnson at the livery needs me to finish some work tomorrow morning. Can't take the boys with me tonight, too dangerous with that cat around, but can't leave them alone in town either." "They could stay with me," Madeline offered immediately. "I have the spare room and it would be no trouble." Relief washed over Sam's features. "You're sure? They can be a handful, especially Jacob." "I'm certain," Madeline assured him. "We'll have a wonderful time and you won't have to worry about them while you're handling the situation at the ranch." That evening, after explaining the change of plans to Ethan and Jacob, who were excited about staying with their teacher, Sam prepared to depart. The boys had already been settled in Madeline's spare room, which fortunately had a bed large enough for both of them to share. At the door, Sam lingered, clearly torn about leaving. "I should be back by tomorrow evening," he said. "3 at the latest." "We'll be fine," Madeline assured him. "The boys and I have plans to bake cookies and read adventure stories." "You're a blessing, Madeline Montgomery," Sam said softly. "I don't know what we would have done without you these past months." Before she could respond, he leaned forward and placed a gentle kiss on her cheek, his lips warm against her skin. "Thank you," he murmured, then quickly donned his hat and headed for his waiting horse. Madeline stood in the doorway, her hand drifting to her cheek where the sensation of his kiss still lingered. It was a small gesture, chaste and brief, but it sent a flutter through her heart that she couldn't ignore. The evening with the boys passed pleasantly, with cookie baking, story reading, and even an impromptu lesson when Ethan expressed curiosity about the constellations they could see through Madeline's window. Both boys were well behaved, though Jacob's boundless energy kept Madeline on her toes. As she tucked them into bed, Jacob asked sleepily, "Miss Montgomery, do you like my pa?" Madeline smoothed his hair back from his forehead. "Of course I do, Jacob. Your father is a good man." "No, I mean, do you like him like Catherine Wilkins likes Mr. Peterson?" "They're getting married next month." Ethan elbowed his brother. "You shouldn't ask things like that, Jake." Madeline smiled at the innocent question. "It's all right, Ethan. Your brother is just curious." She considered how to answer. "Your father is very special to me, Jacob. But these things take time to figure out." "Pa likes you a lot," Jacob confided, his eyelids growing heavy. "He smiles more since we met you, and he wears his good shirt every Friday." Touched by the observation, Madeline kissed each boy on the forehead. "Sleep well, both of you. We'll have breakfast together in the morning." The next day passed quickly, with Madeline taking the boys to the general store to help her select supplies for the school and then to the small town library to borrow books for the coming week. By mid-afternoon, they were back at her cabin, the boys playing checkers while Madeline prepared a simple stew for dinner. Sam had not returned by dinner time, which concerned Madeline slightly, but she didn't want to worry the boys. After they ate, they sat on Madeline's small porch, watching the sunset and listening to the sounds of the town settling down for the evening. "Pa should be back by now," Ethan said finally, voicing what they were all thinking. I'm sure he's just being thorough, Madeline replied with more confidence than she felt. Tracking a mountain lion takes time. As darkness fell completely, Madeline ushered the boys inside and suggested another story to distract them. She had just settled into the armchair with a book when a sharp knock came at the door. Expecting Sam, Madeline hurried to answer it, but found Mayor Perkins standing there instead, his expression grave. "Miss Montgomery," he said, removing his hat, "may I speak with you privately?" A cold dread settled in Madeline's stomach. "Of course," she turned to the boys. "Ethan, Jacob, please continue reading while I speak with the mayor." Outside on the porch, Mayor Perkins didn't waste time with pleasantries. "There's been an accident at the Thornton ranch." Sam was thrown from his horse while tracking that mountain lion. Johnson from the livery rode out there when Sam didn't return for his morning shift and found him unconscious. Madeline's hand flew to her mouth. He's alive," the mayor assured her quickly. "Dr. Miller is with him now at the clinic. But he's in bad shape, Miss Montgomery. Broken ribs, maybe worse injuries we can't see. Doc's concerned." "The boys," Madeline whispered, glancing back at the closed door where Ethan and Jacob waited unaware. "They need to know, but I don't want to frighten them." Mayor Perkins nodded sympathetically. "That's why I came to you first. Figured you'd know best how to tell them, and they'll need somewhere to stay until Sam's back on his feet." "They'll stay with me, of course," Madeline said without hesitation. "As long as necessary. Can I see him now? Should I bring the boys?" "Better wait until morning," the mayor advised. "Doc's still working and Sam's not conscious yet." No sense in upsetting the boys more by having them see their father that way tonight. After the mayor left, Madeline took a moment to compose herself before returning inside. The boys looked up expectantly, immediately sensing something was wrong. "Is it Pa?" Ethan asked, his young face suddenly much older with worry. Madeline sat down between them, taking each of their hands in hers. "Your father had an accident at the ranch," she said gently. "He fell from his horse while tracking the mountain lion." Jacob's eyes filled with tears. "Is he dead?" "Like Mama?" "No, sweetheart," Madeline assured him quickly. "He's hurt, but he's alive. Dr. Miller is taking very good care of him at the clinic." "We need to go see him," Ethan insisted. Already standing, Madeline gently pulled him back down. "We'll go first thing in the morning. Right now, your father is sleeping and healing, and Dr. Miller needs space to work. The best thing we can do tonight is get some rest ourselves, so we can be strong for your father tomorrow." Getting the boys to sleep that night was difficult. Jacob cried himself to exhaustion in Madeline's arms, while Ethan maintained a stoic facade that broke Madeline's heart even more. She knew the older boy was trying to be strong for his brother, taking on a responsibility that no 7-year-old should have to bear. Madeline herself barely slept, her mind filled with worst-case scenarios and memories of Sam's gentle smile, his hands working deftly with tools, his obvious love for his sons. By dawn, she had made up her mind about several things, regardless of what they might find at the clinic. Early the next morning, after a quiet breakfast that none of them ate much of, Madeline took the boys to the clinic. Dr. Miller, a gruff man in his 60s with kind eyes, met them at the door. "He's awake," the doctor said without preamble. "Asking for his boys, stubborn as always, that one." Relief washed over Madeline. "How bad is it?" 3 broken ribs, dislocated shoulder, concussion, and enough bruises to make a man miserable for weeks, Dr. Miller replied. "But he'll live. No internal bleeding that I can detect." "Can we see him now?" Jacob asked anxiously. 5 minutes, the doctor said firmly. "He needs rest more than anything." Sam lay on a narrow bed in a small room at the back of the clinic. His face was pale beneath his tan, with a nasty bruise blooming along his left cheek and a bandage around his head. His chest was wrapped tightly, and his left arm was secured in a sling. Despite his obvious pain, his face lit up when his sons entered the room. "There are my boys," he said, his voice raspy but clear. Jacob burst into tears and would have thrown himself at his father if Madeline hadn't gently held him back. "Careful, sweetheart. Your father's ribs need time to heal." Ethan approached the bed more cautiously. "You promised you'd be careful, Pa," he said, his voice quivering slightly. Sam reached out with his good hand to grasp his son's smaller one. I know, son. I'm sorry. Horse spooked when we caught scent of that cat. Nothing I could do. Did you at least get the mountain lion? Jacob asked, sniffling. A weak smile touched Sam's lips. No, but Johnson and some of the other men are hunting it now. Don't you worry about that. Sam's gaze shifted to Madeline, who stood slightly apart, giving the family their moment. Madeline, he said softly, thank you for taking care of my boys. Of course, she replied, moving closer. They're wonderful children. Dr. Miller appeared in the doorway. Time's up, I'm afraid. Mr. Thornton needs his rest. When can Pa come home? Jacob asked. The doctor and Madeline exchanged glances. He'll need to stay here for at least a few days, Dr. Miller explained. Then he'll need somewhere to recover where he can be looked after. The boarding house isn't suitable with all those stairs. He'll come to my cabin, Madeline said decisively. I have the spare room, and I can care for him there while still teaching. Sam started to protest. Madeline, I couldn't impose. It's not an imposition, she interrupted. It's what's best for everyone. The boys are already staying with me, and this way they won't be separated from you during your recovery. Dr. Miller nodded approvingly. Sounds like the most sensible arrangement. Unless you'd prefer to have the widow Jenkins nurse you back to health, Sam. There was a teasing glint in the older man's eye. Sam grimaced. Madeline's offer sounds perfect, he amended quickly. After promising to return that evening, Madeline took the boys to the general store to purchase supplies they would need for Sam's recovery and their extended stay at her cabin. Word of Sam's accident had spread quickly through the small town, and they received offers of help from nearly everyone they encountered. By the time they returned to the cabin, Mrs. Winters had arranged for Sam's and the boys' belongings to be brought over from the boarding house. The town carpenter had delivered a proper bed frame for the spare room, replacing the narrow one that had been there, and several women from the church had sent over casseroles and baked goods to ensure they wouldn't have to worry about cooking. People sure are nice, Jacob observed as they arranged the new items. That's what community means, Madeline explained. We help each other when times are difficult. Over the next few days, they fell into a new routine. Madeline would teach during the day while a rotation of town women organized by Mrs. Winters sat with Sam at the clinic. After school, Madeline and the boys would visit, bringing small treats and books to help pass the time. In the evenings, they would prepare the cabin for Sam's eventual arrival, making sure everything would be comfortable and accessible for a man with limited mobility. On the fourth day after the accident, Dr. Miller declared Sam well enough to be moved. With the help of several men from town, including the blacksmith and the livery owner, Sam was carefully transported to Madeline's cabin and settled in the spare room, which had been transformed into a comfortable sick room. That evening, after the boys had gone to sleep in the small trundle bed Madeline had borrowed for them to use in the main room, she brought Sam a cup of tea and sat beside his bed. "How are you feeling?" she asked, noting the lines of pain around his eyes despite his attempts to hide his discomfort. "Better now that I'm out of that clinic," Sam replied. "Miller's a good doctor but a terrible conversationalist." Madeline smiled. "The boys are delighted to have you here, though I've had to remind Jacob repeatedly not to bounce on your bed when he visits." A comfortable silence fell between them, broken only by the crackling of the fire in the main room and the occasional snore from Jacob. "This isn't how I imagined being under the same roof as you," Sam said finally, his voice low. "Had more romantic scenarios in mind." Madeline felt heat rise to her cheeks. "Mr. Thornton, you're quite forward for a man who can barely sit up without assistance." "Nearly dying puts things in perspective," he replied, his expression growing serious. "When I was lying out there after the fall, I had a lot of time to think before Johnson found me. Kept thinking about my boys, of course, but also about you, about opportunities not taken, words not said." Madeline's heart quickened. "Sam, let me finish, please," he interrupted gently. "I know it's too soon. I know you came west for independence, not to become an instant mother to two rambunctious boys. I know my situation, a widower with children, a struggling ranch, incomplete medical training isn't what most women dream of." "You don't know what I dream of," Madeline said softly. Sam's eyes, those striking blue eyes that his sons had inherited, locked with hers. Tell me then. What does Madeline Montgomery dream of? The question hung in the air between them, weighted with possibility. Madeline thought of her life before coming west comfortable but empty after her husband's death. She thought of the moment she'd first seen Sam on his knees by that broken fence, his boys sleeping nearby, and how something within her had recognized something in him. I dream of purpose, she said finally, of connection, of building something meaningful that lasts beyond my lifetime. She took a deep breath. When I saw you that day, exhausted but determined, caring for your land and your children with everything you had, something felt right in a way I can't explain. Sam reached for her hand, his touch warm despite his weakened state. I felt it too. Like finding a piece of myself I didn't know was missing. The boys need stability, Madeline cautioned, though she didn't pull her hand away. We can't rush into anything that might confuse them if it doesn't work out. The boys already adore you, Sam pointed out, but you're right. We should take our time, do this properly. His eyes crinkled at the corners, a hint of his usual good humor returning. Though I should warn you, once I'm back on my feet, my courtship will be quite determined. Courtship, Madeline repeated, both thrilled and terrified by the word. Unless you object, Sam said, watching her carefully. Madeline thought of the life she'd imagined for herself when she'd headed west independent, focused on her teaching, perhaps eventually saving enough to open her own small school. She hadn't anticipated a ready-made family, a ranch in need of attention, or a man with unfinished dreams of his own. But she also hadn't anticipated the fullness she felt when Jacob laughed at her stories, or when Ethan's serious face lit up with understanding when she explained a difficult concept, or when Sam looked at her the way he was looking at her now, like she was essential to his world. I don't object, she said finally, squeezing his hand, but I reserve the right to take things slowly. Sam's smile was worth every ounce of uncertainty she felt. I'm not going anywhere, Madeline, except maybe back to my ranch eventually, but I hope by then you might consider coming with us. The weeks of Sam's recovery passed more quickly than Madeline would have believed possible. December arrived, bringing cooler temperatures and preparations for Christmas. Sam's injuries healed steadily, and by mid-month, he was able to move around the cabin with minimal assistance, though Dr. Miller insisted he avoid strenuous activity for at least another few weeks. Living under one roof had accelerated their relationship in unexpected ways. Madeline saw Sam at his most vulnerable in pain, frustrated by his limitations, occasionally short-tempered when he couldn't do the simplest tasks for himself. But she also saw his determination, his unwavering devotion to his sons, and his gratitude for every small kindness. For his part, Sam witnessed Madeline's exhaustion after long days of teaching, followed by housekeeping and caring for 3 males of varying ages and needs. He saw her occasional moments of doubt about her teaching methods and her fierce protectiveness when one of the town's more conservative residents questioned the propriety of their living arrangement, despite the clear medical necessity. They learned each other's habits, preferences, and moods. They developed a comfortable rhythm of shared responsibilities once Sam was mobile enough to help with simple tasks. And in the evenings, after the boys were asleep, they talked about their pasts, their hopes for the future, and the growing certainty that their futures were meant to be intertwined. One evening, a week before Christmas, Sam suggested a walk despite the chill in the air. Dr. Miller says short excursions are good for building my strength back up, he explained when Madeline looked concerned. Bundled in warm coats, they strolled slowly through the quiet streets of Copper Creek, admiring the Christmas decorations that adorned the storefronts and homes. Fresh snow had fallen the day before, and their boots crunched satisfyingly on the packed surface. The boys are beside themselves with excitement about Christmas, Madeline commented. Jacob asked me this morning if Santa Claus knows they're staying at my cabin instead of the boarding house. Sam chuckled. What did you tell him? That Santa is very well informed about such matters, she replied with a smile. Ethan rolled his eyes, but he didn't contradict his brother. Ethan's at that age, Sam said with a hint of nostalgia. Still wants to believe, but his logical mind is starting to question. Catherine and I had the same challenge with him regarding the tooth fairy last year, They had reached the town square, where a large pine tree had been decorated with paper ornaments made by Madeline's students, including Ethan and Jacob. Candles in glass jars hung from the branches, their flames protected from the wind, casting a warm glow in the gathering darkness. Sam stopped walking, turning to face Madeline directly. "I need to ask you something important." Madeline's heart skipped a beat at the seriousness of his tone. "What is it?" "The ranch," Sam began, his breath forming clouds in the cold air. "Johnson offered to buy it. Good price, considering the state of things. He's always wanted his own spread, and with his sons getting older, he's looking to establish something for them." This was not what Madeline had expected. "You're selling the ranch, but it's been in your family for generations. You always said you wanted to pass it on to the boys." Sam nodded, his expression thoughtful. "That was the plan. But these past months have shown me that maybe there's another path for us. The boys are thriving in school, thriving with you. And I've been offered a position as Dr. Miller's assistant, with the understanding that I'll take over his practice when he retires in a few years." "Sam, that's wonderful," Madeline exclaimed, genuinely happy for him. "You'd be able to use your medical training after all." "It would mean staying in town permanently," Sam continued, watching her closely. "Buying a proper house here, establishing roots in Copper Creek instead of out at the ranch." Madeline understood the unspoken question. "The boys would have stability, a good education, and you'd be doing work you love." "But what about what you love?" Sam asked, taking her gloved hands in his. "You came west for independence, for a fresh start. I need to know that whatever decision I make won't interfere with your dreams." In that moment, with snowflakes beginning to fall gently around them and the candle-lit tree casting its warm glow, Madeline realized that her dreams had shifted without her even noticing. What had once been abstract notions of purpose and independence had transformed into something more concrete: the sound of Jacob's laughter, the pride in Ethan's eyes when he mastered a difficult lesson, the warmth of Sam's smile across the dinner table. "My dream was to make a difference," she said carefully, "to build something meaningful. I thought that would be through teaching alone, but now I see it could be more than that." She squeezed his hands. "Whatever you decide about the ranch, Sam, my plans remain the same: to be the best teacher I can be for the children of Copper Creek, including your sons." Relief washed over Sam's features. "Then I have another question for you, Madeline Montgomery." To her astonishment, he carefully lowered himself to one knee in the snow, still holding her hands. "Sam, your ribs, you shouldn't. Some things are worth a little discomfort," he interrupted with a smile. "Madeline, these past months have been the happiest I've known since losing Catherine. You've brought joy back into our lives, shown my boys what it means to have a mother's love again, and made me believe in second chances." He reached into his pocket and produced a small gold ring with a modest diamond that caught the light from the Christmas tree. "I know we agreed to take things slowly, but nearly dying has a way of clarifying one's priorities. I love you, Madeline. The boys love you. Would you do us the honor of becoming a permanent part of our family? Will you marry me?" Madeline's vision blurred with tears as she looked down at this man, this strong, kind, devoted father who had somehow worked his way into her heart in the span of a few short months. "Yes," she whispered, then louder. "Yes, Sam, I will marry you." His smile was radiant as he slid the ring onto her finger, then carefully stood to pull her into an embrace. His kiss was gentle but filled with promise, warming her despite the cold night air. When they finally broke apart, Madeline noticed movement near the general store across the square. Ethan and Jacob were watching them, barely visible in the shadows, with Mrs. Winters standing behind them. "I believe we have an audience," Madeline murmured, nodding in their direction. Sam turned and spotted his sons. "Might as well come out, boys," he called. "I know you're there." Jacob burst from their hiding place, running across the snow-covered square with Ethan following more sedately. "Did she say yes, Pa? Is Miss Montgomery going to be our new ma?" Sam lifted Jacob with his good arm, wincing slightly but hiding it well. "She did indeed say yes." "If that's all right with you boys." "Of course it is," Jacob exclaimed. "We've been hoping you'd ask her for ages. Haven't we, Ethan?" Ethan nodded, his expression serious as usual but with unmistakable happiness in his eyes. "We have. Pa's been planning it for weeks, Miss Montgomery." He even wrote to Boston to get your ring size from your friend Mrs. Collins. Madeline looked at Sam in surprise. You wrote to Elizabeth? She never mentioned it in her letters. Asked her to keep it a secret, Sam admitted. Wanted it to be a surprise. Mrs. Winters approached, beaming with satisfaction. Well, it's about time. The whole town's been waiting for this announcement. She hugged Madeline warmly. Welcome to the family, officially. Though if you ask me, you've been part of it since the day Sam moved the boys to town. News of their engagement spread through Copper Creek like wildfire, and by the following day, Madeline found herself receiving congratulations from everyone she encountered. The school board members assured her that her position would remain secure after her marriage, though several of the more traditional members hinted that they expected her eventual retirement when blessed events occurred. Christmas arrived with a festive spirit that Madeline hadn't experienced since childhood. The small cabin was decorated with pine boughs, paper chains made by the boys, and candles in every window. On Christmas Eve, they attended the service at the church, where Reverend Collins acknowledged their engagement with a special blessing. Christmas morning brought a flurry of excitement as the boys opened the gifts that Madeline and Sam had carefully selected for them: new books, hand-carved wooden animals, warm mittens knitted by Mrs. Winters, and the special surprises from Santa that had been hidden until the last minute. After the presents were opened and breakfast eaten, Sam handed Madeline a small package wrapped in brown paper. "One more gift," he said with a mysterious smile. Inside, Madeline found a deed not to the ranch as she might have expected, but to a house in Copper Creek. A house she recognized as the large white one on Elm Street, with the wraparound porch and the picket fence, which had stood empty since its elderly owner had moved to Denver to live with her daughter the previous spring. "You bought the Arlington house." She gasped, looking up at Sam in astonishment. "Finalized it yesterday," he confirmed. "Johnson's purchase of the ranch provided the funds. It needs some work, but it has 4 bedrooms, room for the boys to each have their own space, plus one for us and one for." He hesitated, glancing at the boys who were engrossed in their new toys. "For the future," he finished softly. The implication warmed Madeline's heart. "It's perfect, Sam. When can we see it?" "Today, if you'd like," he offered. "Previous owner left most of the furniture, so it's ready to move into as soon as we're married." He looked at her hopefully. "Speaking of which, I thought perhaps Valentine's Day would be appropriate if that's not too soon." "Valentine's Day is perfect," Madeline agreed, leaning in to kiss him softly. "Not too soon at all." The weeks leading up to the wedding passed in a blur of preparations. Madeline wrote to Elizabeth Collins in Boston, who promised to attend despite the long journey. Sam continued his recovery and began his apprenticeship with Dr. Miller, spending mornings at the clinic while Madeline taught and the boys attended school. In late January, they moved into the house on Elm Street, deciding there was no need to wait until after the wedding since they'd already been living under one roof for months. The larger space gave everyone room to breathe, and Madeline delighted in making it their own, incorporating some of her possessions from Boston, which had been in storage since her arrival, alongside Sam's family heirlooms brought from the ranch. On the morning of February 14, 1879, Madeline stood in the bedroom of their new home, wearing a dress of pale blue silk that Elizabeth had helped her select from the dressmaker in Copper Creek. Her friend bustled around her, adjusting the flowers in her hair and fussing with the fall of the skirt. "I still can't believe you're getting married again, and in Arizona territory of all places," Elizabeth marveled. "When you left Boston, I was certain you'd be back within a year, homesick and regretting your adventure." Madeline smiled at her oldest friend's reflection in the mirror. "I never expected this either, but sometimes life has other plans." A soft knock at the door was followed by Ethan's voice. "Miss Montgomery, Pa sent me to see if you're almost ready. He says the Reverend's getting nervous and Jacob can't sit still anymore." Elizabeth opened the door to reveal Ethan dressed in his best suit, his hair slicked down in a valiant but ultimately unsuccessful attempt to tame his cowlicks. His eyes widened when he saw Madeline. "You look really pretty, Miss Montgomery," he said with genuine admiration. "Thank you, Ethan," Madeline replied, touched by his compliment. And soon you won't have to call me Miss Montgomery anymore." A rare, full smile broke across Ethan's face. "I know, Jacob and I have been practicing saying Ma instead. Is that okay? Pa said we should ask you first." Tears sprang to Madeline's eyes. "That would make me very happy, Ethan." Elizabeth discreetly wiped away a tear of her own. "Well, we shouldn't keep them waiting any longer. Are you ready, Madeline?" With a deep breath, Madeline nodded. "More than ready." The church was filled to capacity with what seemed like the entire population of Copper Creek. As Madeline walked down the aisle on the arm of Mayor Perkins, who had offered to give her away, her eyes locked on Sam standing at the altar. He looked impossibly handsome in his new suit, his blue eyes bright with emotion, and flanked by his sons who were practically vibrating with excitement. The ceremony was simple but meaningful. They exchanged traditional vows, promising to love and cherish each other through all of life's challenges. When the Reverend pronounced them husband and wife, Sam's kiss was tender yet passionate, promising a lifetime of love in that single moment. The celebration afterward at their home on Elm Street lasted well into the evening, with food contributed by every woman in town, music provided by the local fiddler and his band, and enough well wishes to last a lifetime. As the last guests departed, and with Elizabeth supervising the boys' bedtime routines as promised, Sam led Madeline to the porch swing. "Happy, Mrs. Thornton?" he asked, pulling her close against the evening chill. "Incredibly so, Doctor." "Thornton," she replied, using the title he would one day officially earn. They sat in comfortable silence for a few moments, watching the stars emerge in the clear night sky. "I keep thinking about that day," Sam said finally. "How close I came to missing you entirely. If that storm hadn't taken down my fence, if you'd passed by an hour earlier or later." "Perhaps it was fate," Madeline suggested, leaning her head against his shoulder, "or divine intervention." "Whatever it was, I'm grateful," Sam murmured, pressing a kiss to her temple. Who would have thought that a broken fence, two exhausted boys sleeping in the dirt, and a Boston schoolteacher with a stubborn streak would lead to this? Madeline smiled, remembering that first sight of him on his knees beside the broken fence, his determination evident even in exhaustion. "Life takes unexpected turns, Samuel Thornton, but I believe we ended up exactly where we were meant to be." As they sat together, wrapped in the quiet joy of their wedding day, Madeline reflected on the journey that had brought her west. She had sought purpose and independence, a new beginning after loss. What she had found instead was a family, a loving husband, and two wonderful boys who now called her Ma with affection and trust. She had found a community that valued her contributions and a home where she belonged completely. The Wild West had proven to be exactly what she needed, though not in the way she had expected. And as Sam's arms tightened around her, Madeline knew with absolute certainty that the life they would build together, with all its joys, challenges, and unforeseen detours, would be more beautiful and fulfilling than any future she could have imagined for herself. "I love you, Samuel Thornton," she whispered into the cool evening air. "And I love you, Madeline Thornton," he replied, his voice steady and sure, like a promise that would last a lifetime. "Today, tomorrow, and for all the days to come."